All right. Well, it is our delight to welcome Canadian singer-songwriter, musician Devin Cuddy to the show. Devin, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. It's nice to chat. I definitely wanted to have a musician like yourself on in this time because the pandemic obviously has taken a massive toll on the music industry with, little to no live performances since March. Touring musicians have been on standby, essentially. Could you just give us a little insight as to how things have been going for you? Like, how are you doing? And, how have you been keeping yourself busy?
Well, that is the $1 million question. I mean, it's been tough. I think that for me, it's been mostly boring. I miss the travel. Most of my career is spent on the road, and the live performances as well, obviously. We tried doing some live streams and such, especially at the beginning when it was really kind of heavy on. I think people are tiring of that a little bit. I know that on my end, I am. It's very odd to play a song. I know it's very egotistical, but you lose the validation when nobody claps. I still say thank you after every song anyway, so whatever. But, there's a disconnect, I think, in it that was kind of a drag. But for me, I've just been, watching Netflix, trying to write, that's been a little difficult for me personally. And then you just try to be creative in ways to express yourself creatively. That's been a big challenge, I think, for myself and lots of artists.
Are there things about being on the road that initially were like annoying that you kind of miss?
Oh my God, so much. Like airports. I did one show in October where we stayed in a hotel and I was over the moon. I miss hotels so much. And, slowly as the time passed, every little thing about the road, especially things that bugged you came to miss, whether it's the waiting, the driving, whatever it is, all of it, you realize you took for granted a little bit. And I think there'll be a lot of smiling faces in vans when it all comes back.
You mentioned trying to write too. Like, I think it would be a huge assumption to think that, musicians have all this free time now. They could easily write, 3 albums or something. But it really takes a toll on your mental health too, right? Like that whole routine is gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple different types of writers, and some are like woodshed writers who they really enjoy the solitude and they can use that time constructively. And then I'm more on the other side where I draw from experiences and things that I would kind of come across, whether it's stories or interactions with people from traveling and, just life, whether it's sitting in a pub and meeting people or going to shows or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of stunted my creative productivity because I've always drawn from those things for my writing. And, that's kind of gone now. I ended up trying to do more instrumental stuff, because that is a little more something that I can look at the piano and, just kind of focus in on that. But in terms of storytelling, I've found that the inspiration has been harder to come by. You can only write so many songs about your apartment, right?
Yeah, that ironing board, 7-minute classic.
That medley, yeah.
Are you talking to your friends in the music industry a lot? Like what's kind of the common feeling? Is it frustration? What is it? What do you guys talk about?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about how people are keeping busy. And, certainly at the beginning when everybody was locked down, there was a frustration in checking in on people just to see how they were getting through. Then studios started to open up and people were able to do different things. But yeah, I think generally there's just a sorrow. I mean, I don't think it's there's a frustration, obviously, but not because most people think that it's being handled incorrectly or whatever. I think it's just kind of a bummer, it's just in reality, we understand that our business is kind of cruxed on people cramming into small spaces, and that's kind of what makes it great.
Right.
And so I think there's an understanding that that's not something that's just going to come back overnight, but there's definitely kind of a down feeling. I think what certainly for me, as artists are starting to, I've been reaching out to other artists talking about collaborating and writing together in smaller groups. But there's just, people just miss the stage,
Yeah.
You think of the 1920s and you're like, why was everyone dressed up all the time? I feel like it was just after a pandemic too. I feel like once this is over, everyone's going to be just raring to go to shows and hopefully it comes back with a vengeance.
Well, I did one show in October outside, like north of Kingston, and it was in a small venue where they had 50 people separated, all the various COVID requirements, and people were just over the moon. Like, even if we sucked, they would have loved it. So I think you're right. I think there'll be a huge wave, and hopefully that will make up for some of the lost time and lost revenue as well. So
tuxedos 3 times a week, I think.
Yeah.
That extreme we're talking. Speaking of outside, wondering your thoughts about this. Like I certainly noticed this, and I don't know if it was just me, but obviously in June, July, August, people are trying to get outside and take advantage of the warm weather. But I don't recall seeing a lot of musicians performing at outdoor patios or anything like that with restaurants and bars. Is that because the establishments themselves don't have enough money to pay musicians? Or I don't know if you noticed that too, but I tried to walk around as much as I could, and I didn't see too many musicians performing outside in the city, at least.
Well, I think regionally it was all different. There was a couple of things. One thing was that some places they actually couldn't have music or something. I don't remember the specifics, but there was something about live music. You couldn't get up from your table, dancing, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then the other thing is, especially for larger events, is, there's a promoter behind every event who has to kind of stake themselves to put these things on. And people didn't know what next week was going to look like. They didn't know, there's all sorts of insurance problems with COVID as well. So I think there was just a lot of timidness from the promoter side. And then the other side of it is that a lot of the clubs, like established clubs in Toronto, they're just indoor places anyway. They didn't have space to do it.
Right. So
if it popped up anywhere, it would be restaurants that had a large patio but didn't do music generally. So I think if this carries on next summer, will be much, I think either way, next summer will be much different. Mm-hmm. But there was still this huge factor of uncertainty that I think scared off a lot of people from doing it. And then, of course, a lot of these establishments just didn't have money, and setting up the infrastructure to do that is expensive, and they just needed to get money in the door first. And then,
You guys have like a once COVID is over fantasy, like the first thing you're going to do?
Well, get on a plane and go and play somewhere else. I think, honestly, for me, it would be, I'm here at the Cameron House. There's a great place in Toronto. And I think it would be to be on this stage, but not just alone. So, that would be the first thing, because that was a very normalizing thing in my life. This was where I started playing. I continue to play. This was my scene and whatever you want to call it. So this would be the beginning. And then I think, just traveling again, taking the show on the road, going back to places. I had taken advantage of, or at least not fully realized, how much of my life was in Saskatoon, Halifax, Calgary. I have friends all over. And then after what's coming on a full year of not traveling to those places, I realized that, that was a big part of me, not just as a musician, but as a person, socially, whatever. And so doing that stuff will be what I'm looking forward to.
So how can we help, Devin? Like how can music lovers out there really support the musicians they love and the music venues in the city that we all adore? You just mentioned you're sitting in one of the most legendary places in Toronto, at the Cameron House at Queen and Spadina. What do you say to people who say they want to help, but they don't really know how?
Well, for musicians, buying merchandise and stuff like that, whatever avenues the artist has set up for money is always the best way to do it. And for venues, that's a good question. I don't know. There's been various reliefs that the governments have provided to them. But, I don't think that they figured out how to do that, because just putting like a tip jar out front of a venue is not going to save it necessarily, So I think for venues, it's just when they open, go a lot. Yeah. Patron it as much as you can. But I think that's been a big challenge, and we've lost a lot of great venues in Toronto. I'm sure across the country they have as well. Certainly a bunch of rooms that I have played. So supporting the arts and propping it back up when it comes back will help, because hopefully people will see its return to viability, and new places will open. I think a lot of new places will open in old spots. Like, there's some places that aren't going to become Zellers, or not Zellers.
R.I.P.
I'm stuck in the past.
Where the lowest price is the law.
Yeah. And just those weird restaurants in there too.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah.
I used to go to Gerrard Square at a Zellers. That's the one I grew up with. But yeah, these places will still be set up. So hopefully people will step in and take them back over.